Hey Fit Friends, Kristen here. Today we're about to get on the 11-Point River. We're going to do 27 miles from Cane Bluff to Riverton. It's a new river for us and we are super excited. We're all loaded up, just about ready to go. Can't wait to share this trip with you. We were headed to the Buffalo, but pivoted last minute due to the water levels and went to the 11-Point River in Missouri, and I couldn't be more happy with that decision. Let's talk about 3 things that worked for this trip and 3 things that didn't. So let me tell you about the first thing that worked. As a fat person, when I'm outdoors, one of the things that is most difficult and frustrating and makes me sweat and gets on my nerves is changing clothes when I'm wet. It's like a freaking wrestling match with the clothes and my legs and my arms and all of that. Well, one thing that helped me with that on this trip was a dress that I brought. I brought this dress with just the intention of sleeping in it. But once we got to setting up camp on the 11-Point River, I realized the campgrounds were kind of small and compact, and there wasn't a lot of good places to privately change. And when you hammock camp instead of tent camp, it becomes a little more difficult to change privately. Personally, I'm only modest for the people who are there, not for my own sake. I usually just holler out, "I'm changing, don't look if you don't want to," and go behind my tarp and change, but usually it's only about 30% privacy. The tarp doesn't go all the way to the ground. Sometimes I can change in my hammock a little, but I don't like to do that. I don't want to get it wet or dirtier than it has to be, and it's warm in there, makes it even harder to get your clothes on. So this dress that I just kind of brought on accident turned out to be a great tool for changing privately. I could throw the lightweight quick drying dress on over my wet clothes and then remove them discreetly and put on my dry clothes. I actually could use it to fan my bits a little and maybe try to get them a little drier so that I didn't have to wrestle with my clothes as much. So a camp dress will probably accompany me on every trip now because it was just a cool thing that worked well and came in handy. Oh, and another benefit to the camp dress was that I used it to sleep in, and at night, when I needed to get up and go pee, there were less garments to deal with when I found a place to pee. I could just, didn't have pants or shorts to pull down and pee on and all of that. So anyway, camp dress, that's where it's at. Let me tell you about the second thing we did that really worked for us. Hikers call it a 0 day. My brother called it a camp day. I'm going to call it a dry out day. But whatever you call it, it was staying an extra day at camp. We put up camp, and then when we woke up the next morning, we didn't leave. We stayed for a whole nother day and left the morning after that. And it was great. Super great. I enjoyed, number 1, getting to dry all my clothes out and anything else that was wet. And I enjoyed getting to sit and enjoy my coffee without having to rush and get on the water and make miles. And then I enjoyed exploring the area. We picked a nice little area and you could swim across the river, and there was dry creek bed to explore, paddle up river and fish and float back down, fish in the area, take naps. I got to practice flying my drone. Just got to sit and enjoy the day. We got to watch the Saturday floaters float by. Everybody waved and said hi, and it was fun to watch them and talk to them. It was just a fun day. Look for artifacts and fossils and just sit and chill and have no rush and no hurry to get anywhere, and take our time with meal preparation and just sit around, chat, hang out, and enjoy the company of the people we were with. So I highly recommend taking a 0 day, camp day, or dry out day, whatever you want to call it. It was a lot of fun and made the trip just more pleasant and enjoyable and took a little of the stress out of it. So the third thing that worked for us, and this might seem obvious, was going on the weekdays. So normally we would drive down on a Wednesday night, set up camp, get up the next morning, break camp, go to the outfitters, and get on the water somewhere around 1 or 2 in the afternoon on Thursday. This time, We left early on Wednesday, and we got on the water about 4 p.m. on Wednesday. And that gave us a whole extra weekday on the water. And what was awesome about that was that we had the river all to ourselves. And it felt very wild and scenic and wildernessy. We just really got to enjoy the thing all to ourselves. So even though it was a little extra work to get there and get on the river on the same day that we traveled, it was great to start out the next day already on the river and having it all to ourselves. There are a few honorable mentions in the things that worked category. One is bike shorts. My bike shorts worked way better than my not bike shorts, as you can see by the image, in preventing chafing, making me feel comfortable, and looking okay. Another thing I'd like to mention is this awesome tiny chainsaw that a friend of ours brought. Made quick work of chopping up the wood and worked for hours. It was amazing. So now let's talk about a few things that didn't work. Although this was an amazing trip, and we got so lucky with the weather and finding camp spots for our hammocks and all of that, there were definitely some things that didn't work. The first thing that didn't work was these water shoes. The sole just wasn't thick enough to handle walking on the rocks when we had to get out and drag our kayaks. They just didn't work out for me, to the point that I wore some other shoes that you'll hear about in just a minute. The second thing that didn't work for this trip was not doing a shakedown or a trial run. On the last trip or two, I noticed my kayak had been taking on water, so I spent some time patching holes and doing some maintenance on it, and took it back out to the lake and paddled around, and there wasn't any water. However, what I failed to do was load it down like it would be loaded down for this trip. And almost immediately, when we got on the water, I started hearing the sound of water filling my boat. It sounded like this. So we pulled over, and I patched up some holes with some Gorilla Tape, and we were able to make our way down the river. However, about twice a day I'd have to stop and empty the boat before I got going in the morning, just to get all the water out. I would know it was time to empty the boat when paddling got really slow. So I know next time to load the boat up and do a shakedown, just to make sure that things are going to go the way I plan. And that leads me to the next thing that didn't quite work, which is along the same lines. The third thing that didn't work for me was not giving my gear a good once over. When you're on a 4-day river trip, you kind of need your water filter to work. You kind of need your shoes to stay on your feet. Those kind of things are just, necessary. Well, in order for that to happen, you should probably check them out before you get on the water. I didn't do that. And when I went to put on my other water shoes, I found that the whole side had come unstitched. And when I tried to use my water filter, it barely came out in a trickle. So next time, I'll make sure to check those things. And I had a few other gear failures. So guess it's time to spend some money and buy some new gear. But also, it's a good reminder to make sure everything's going to work for you before you get on the river. Luckily, I was able to use some other people's water filter, and I took a few minutes to stitch up my shoe with fishing line, and it still worked better than those other shoes that I mentioned as thing number 1 that didn't work. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out to Richard's Canoe Rental in Alton, Missouri. They are who we used for a shuttle, and they were excellent, and every part of the interaction was great. From talking to Renee on the phone and her answering a lot of my questions, to her giving me a complete rundown on the river and what to expect. She was very patient, helpful, and kind, and we were very pleased with their service. No adventure is complete without a few setbacks, and despite these setbacks, the 11-Point River did not disappoint. It was beautiful, wild, rustic, scenic, and the weather was amazing. The only thing I could have wished for more of was better fishing for myself. If you haven't paddled the 11-Point River, you should get there as soon as you can. It's amazing. And remember, the outdoors is for everybody.